Hey guys, welcome back. Please like, subscribe, and share. If you get to the end of this video and you change your mind, you can always unlike and unsubscribe and unshare. Now, we're going to be talking about Isaiah chapter 53, verse 8 today. I did two videos already about verse 1 and verse 2, and then I kind of put it on the back burner. But somebody made a comment, and they told me that I was wrong. They said that most of the verses in chapter 53 that describe the suffering servant don't match up with what we see of the Jews. Let me ask you something. In verse 2 there, which says, he was like a root out of dry ground. Has Israel ever been described as a root out of dry ground? Yes. Has Jesus ever been described as a root out of dry ground? No. Fail. Next. Then the next point, they said the Jews can't both be the suffering servant of 53 and God's people of 53 who are the benefactors of the suffering servant's punishment. That makes no sense whatsoever. And of course it doesn't, because you're reading a very poor English translation, and they're all very poor. Even the JPS Jewish version of the Tanakh is, to me, it's badly translated. We'll talk about that in a bit, but first of all, let's look at what it says in English before we look at the Hebrew here. And first I want to tell you something about the Hebrew. How do we know it's true? How do we know that there isn't different versions and everything? I want you to take the version we're looking at today in Hebrew. There's only 14 words in that verse. 14 Hebrew words make up verse 8 in chapter 53. When you translate it into English, it's going to take you about 30 words, and there's all kinds of room for error and mischief. But let's look what it says in English first. Now, in order to tell you what it says in English, there's so many different versions. We're going to break it down into like 4 different sections. The first section of verse 8 in English, the King James Version, we'll go back to that one first. It says, he was taken from prison and from judgment. Another version, the NIV version, says, by oppression and judgment he was taken away. Other translations say unjustly condemned, he was led away. So it's all over the place. Now the second line or second section says, yet who of his generation protested? Another version says, no one cared that he died without descendants. Then there's the version, the next line, which some versions cut out. It says, he was cut off from the land of the living. Another version replaces it with, he was cut off midstream. The last line, some versions say, for the transgression of my people. Some of the versions even capitalize the M in the my people. Okay, to make it look like it's talking about God or Jesus. And it's not. It's talking about the Gentile nations. But another version says he was struck down for the rebellion of my people. And some people add, of my people to whom the stroke was due. So, do you believe in any of those translations? I don't. So, in addition to always asking yourself, what does the original Hebrew say? The other question that you should always ask is, who is speaking here? Okay, in Isaiah 53, remember it starts at the end of 52, where God says, my servant will prosper. Jesus didn't prosper. Israel will. Okay, so it can't be talking about anybody else besides Jesus or Israel. And we know Jesus failed, so it's talking about Israel prospering. Now you get into 53, and you're asking yourself, who's talking? This is the Gentile nations. Okay, it's not God, it's not Isaiah. It's the Gentile nations looking back on how they thought, oh man, the Jews, they were subhuman, and we treated them like dirt and everything. And it turns out they really are God's servant. Okay? So now we're past the living land part. Let's look at the last 4 words then. Mepisa, ami, naga, lamo. Mepisa is the word that's being translated as transgression, rightfully so. It's not sins. Okay? The word sin does not appear in verse 8. The next word, ami, my people. Okay? Naga, that's the word that they're using as a, like what the punishment, plague, disease. It can mean, that's they're translating as stroke, wound. That's the word there, naga. Okay, and the last word, this is the most important word that we're going to talk about right here. The very last word in verse 8 says lamo. Okay, That's a plural word. It doesn't say he was stricken. It means they. Plural. Now you'll see this word also used in the very beginning of the Bible in Genesis chapter 9, both in verse 26 and 27. And it's referring to Shem and Japheth and their descendants. So when you translate it into English like that, it kind of changes the meaning of it. It makes it seem like, oh, somebody's being stricken for you. Oh, I'm hitting myself in the foot with a hammer for your sins, right? And it's not an atonement passage. It's about what the Gentile nations have done to Israel. Have a nice day. Now, if there's people that still have doubts that it's plural, whether it's plural or singular, I want you to look at the very next verse, verse 9. What does it say about he was in his grave, he was set among the wicked, with the rich in his death, though he had done no justice and spoke no falsehood? Look at that word here, in his death. Okay, is that what it says? The word here is bamotav. And it's plural, in his deaths. More than one death. Did Jesus die more than once? Okay, so you're seeing that when you're translating this and you're trying to say, oh, it's one person, it's talking about Jesus. It's just wrong. Sorry. Have a nice day.